Wigan Athletic winning the FA Cup, the release of a new Grand Theft Auto, Elon Musk seeing his own children. These were all things that had happened more often in the last 20 years than San Marino winning a game of football. Until the 2024-25 UEFA Nations League, that is. Billed as the world's worst team for many years, since playing their first official match in November 1990, San Marino's record until September 2024 read 1-1, drawn 9, lost 196. It is the worst record in international football, containing lowlights such as losing 10-0 against Norway, 11-0 against the Netherlands, and a historic 13-0 defeat against Germany. In competitive fixtures, if you can believe it, San Marino's record was even worse. In 176 attempts, over the course of some 34 years, they haven't won a single Euros or World Cup qualifier. A 0-0 draw with Estonia, who were ranked 83rd in the world at the time, in Euro 2016 qualifying 10 years ago, was described as, quote, an incredible moment, the same feeling as when my daughter was born, by the San Marino manager at that time, Pierangelo Manzaroli, who won 38 caps for his country as a player between 1991 and 2001. It is because of San Marino's historic lack of success, not in spite of it, that they have become a source of immense fascination for millions of football fans worldwide. And yet, in the space of 2 months, that reputation has been shattered. Out of their 4 2024-25 UEFA Nations League D matches, San Marino only lost 1. It's a run which has included their first win in over 20 years, their first ever away win, their first ever competitive win, their first time scoring 2 goals in a competitive match, their first time scoring 3 goals in any match, and of course, their first ever promotion. That not only earns San Marino a place in the UEFA Nations League C next season, where they could come up against the likes of Slovenia and Georgia, both of whom made the knockout stage of Euro 2024, it also means that they will most likely enter the playoffs for the 2026 World Cup in Canada, Mexico, and the United States. From no wins in over 2 decades, conceding an average of more than 4 goals a game, and scoring an average of just 0.15 goals a game, San Marino have now won 2 and drawn 1 of their last 4 competitive matches, conceding an average of less than 1 goal a game, and in their most recent game, over the most recent international break, and I really cannot emphasise this enough, they scored 3 goals. It is maybe the most sudden and extraordinary change in fortune in the history of international football. There are children in this world, admittedly, only 5 weeks old, who have only ever known an era of San Marino dominance. There are, by my estimation, about 40 newborn children in San Marino who are just sick of the nation's unrelenting era of success.
I'm sorry, winning. You starting to get the concept now? Oops, winning.
They've never seen their team lose. But how did it happen? Is there something that San Marino has started putting in their water supply? And is it a sign that the end times are almost upon us? Almost certainly yes. Well, anyway, that's what today's video is all about. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey to the world's oldest republic, once famed for a football team that couldn't stop losing, as we take a look at one of the most remarkable underdog stories and turnarounds in the history of the international game. If everyone loves an underdog, as it's often claimed, then it's no wonder that there is an almost unique affection within the football community reserved for San Marino. A tiny landlocked microstate surrounded by Italy, the entire population of San Marino could fit inside the average Premier League, Serie A or Second Bundesliga stadium, and if you took every San Marinese footballer to have reached full professional status since the national team was founded, you still wouldn't have enough players to fill a single starting 11. It's for that reason that the San Marino team has historically, and indeed up to and including the present day, been filled predominantly by semi-professionals and amateurs who have stepped out onto the likes of Wembley and the Bernabeu while holding down jobs as dentists, accountants, and truck drivers. Not all at once, of course. We shouldn't be surprised, therefore, that they have struggled to win games. The aberration is San Marino's recent results, not the more than 3 decades of defeats, often by very large margins, which preceded them. San Marino is home to the world's oldest constitution, which began on the 8th of October 1600, replacing the previous constitution, the town statutes, which had served San Marino since about 1300. That is roughly 500 years before the United States of America was founded, and San Marino's current borders have been unchanged since 1463, 30 years before Columbus even made his journey across the Atlantic and arrived in the so-called New World. The origins of San Marino are actually far older than that though. The country's name, San Marino, is taken from Saint Marinus, an early Christian deacon who, according to legend, fled the nearby city of Rimini to Monte Titano in modern-day San Marino after an insane woman accused him of being her husband, founding a chapel monastery in the mountains, and living as a hermit in the year 301. The community that Saint Marinus founded, around his chapel monastery, expanded in the 1300s and 1400s, would grow into the state of San Marino, and if you visit the microstate to this day, you will do well to walk far without coming across something commemorating him. In other words then, if a mad woman hadn't falsely claimed to have been a man called Marinus' wife over 1700 years ago, and we will just have to take his word for it that she was indeed mad and wasn't telling the truth, we wouldn't have had one of football's greatest ever underdog stories almost 2,000 years on. Thank you, allegedly insane woman. For the best part of 2 millennia, San Marino managed to maintain its sovereignty despite multiple regional wars and conquests by being small, cute, and kinda chill. It's the same way that Sebastian Giovinco managed to avoid a lot of the hate that other players got for moving to Saudi Arabia. The story that the Sammarinese like to tell themselves is that their independence is a consequence of their diplomacy and negotiation skills, or the victory of words over arms, as it was put in the Geography Now video about San Marino on YouTube, which is somewhat ironic, given that San Marino is a nation of weapon aficionados, obsessed with guns and swords, unlike almost anywhere else. The less complimentary view, sometimes expressed by Italians, is that San Marino simply wasn't big or important enough to be worth the effort of conquering. The truth probably lies somewhere between the two. Although San Marino has never been permanently conquered, it has certainly been very heavily lent on at multiple times throughout history. After Mussolini came to power in Italy via a coup d'etat in 1922, for example, San Marino's Grand and General Council was forcibly disbanded, and in the country's 1923 general election, threats from Italian fascists prevented any left-wing parties from standing. The so-called Patriotic Bloc, made up of 4 fascist parties, the largest of them the imaginatively named Sammarinese Fascist Party, therefore stood unopposed. The Sammarinese Fascist Party, headed by Giuliano Gozzi at the time, ruled San Marino as a one-party fascist state for the next 20 years, implementing laws which shadowed Italy's National Fascist Party, such as the racial law, which prohibited marriage between Sammarinese nationals and either foreigners or Jews, but not with non-Jewish Italians. In 1942, a year before the Sammarinese Fascist Party's rule ended, Gozzi ordered that all Jews of San Marino should be deported and jailed. In 1943, the RAF bombed San Marino in the belief that the German army was stationed there, killing 35 people. A year later, the Battle of San Marino between German-led and British-led forces resulted in an Allied victory after just 3 days, and in 1945, the British called a snap general election. This time around, the shoe would be on the other foot. Just 6 weeks before Benito Mussolini would be hung upside down from a metal girder above a service station in the centre of Milan, fascist parties were this time prohibited from standing in San Marino's 1945 election, in which the left-wing Committee of Freedom emerged victorious. San Marino, it is claimed, holds the distinction of being the first country to elect a communist government as a result. It is a lot of firsts and distinctions, I'm sure you'd agree, for such a tiny nation. Prior to the 1923 election, when Mussolini's fascists prevented left-wing parties from standing, socialists and conservatives in San Marino had been on the verge of a civil war. A coalition of San Marino's equally inventively named Sammarinese Communist Party and Sammarinese Socialist Party governed San Marino for the next 12 years. until a constitutional crisis in 1957 saw a rival, non-communist provisional government formed and immediately recognised by France, Italy, and the United States. San Marino, therefore, is the only Western European country to have had a communist government, and the Sammarinese Communist Party remained the country's second largest party in every election, right up until the early 1990s and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. If you're wondering what any of this has to do with Sammarinese football and the national team's recent uptick in form, the answer is virtually nothing, but it's interesting, and that should be enough. It also brings us right up to the relevant period for the creation of the San Marino national football team. San Marino is the world's fifth smallest sovereign state by area, behind the Vatican City, Monaco, Nauru and Tuvalu, and the fifth smallest by population, trailing Nauru and Palau, but smaller than either Monaco or Liechtenstein. That means that both by area and population, San Marino is the smallest country in the world with a FIFA-affiliated national football team. Whereas other microstates like Monaco and the Vatican only have unofficial representative teams, with Monaco focusing their efforts on a club side that competes within the French Football League system rather than a national team, and the Vatican prioritising Catholicism and covering up historic cases of child sexual abuse, San Marino said, you know what, we will create a rubbish national team that loses all of our games in the mid to late 1980s. And so, that is exactly what they did. San Marino's oldest club, AC Libertas, were founded in 1928, the San Marino Football Federation was founded in 1933, and the country's first competition, consisting of 4 teams, kicked off in the summer of 1937. In 1960, SS Serenissima, now known as Victor San Marino, were founded, a Sammarinese football club which entered the Italian Football League system, not unlike AS Monaco in France, and in 1963, San Marino founded their first football academy. It wasn't until 1985, however, that the country founded their own domestic league, and in 1986, a national team, which applied for FIFA and UEFA membership. Following a 2-year probationary period, San Marino became FIFA and UEFA members in 1988, playing their first official match against Switzerland in November 1990, which they lost 4-0. Over the next couple of decades, that would come to be recognised as an excellent result by San Marino standards. The next time that they met Switzerland, in only 1991, they lost 7-0, a result that was repeated in 2015. During the intervening 24 years, between those two 7-0 defeats against Switzerland, San Marino lost a soul-destroying further 22 matches by either 7 goals or more. The heaviest of all, a 13-0 defeat against Germany, probably wasn't the most painful, given the calibre of the opposition, but it was perhaps the most brutal. Whereas a lot of major nations used to treat San Marino with kid gloves, Germany, just 2 months after being knocked out of the 2006 World Cup as hosts, at the death in extra time against Italy in the semi-finals, were in no mood for forgiveness. Having flown into Italy, like all teams, as far as the Sammarinese players were concerned, it felt as though the Germans considered them to be indistinguishable from Italians and that they had revenge on their minds. They averaged a goal every 7 minutes. Lucas Podolski scored 4, while Bastian Schweinsteiger, Miroslav Klose, and Thomas Hitzelsberger all bagged a brace. It stood as the heaviest Euros qualifier defeat of all time until France beat Gibraltar 14-0 in 2023, stripping San Marino of one unwanted record. Fear not though, they still hold on to a great many others. It took San Marino more than 70 attempts to win their first game, which came in a 1-0 win against Liechtenstein in a friendly on home soil in April 2004. If they thought that was bad, it would take over 20 years and almost twice as many games before San Marino won their second game, also against Liechtenstein, but this time in a competitive fixture 2 months ago. Throughout that time, despite going by the infamous moniker, the worst team in the world, which was a reflection of San Marino's winlessness and their position at the foot of the FIFA World Rankings, the reality is that even at their lowest ebb, maybe in the mid to late 2000s, San Marino were never actually the worst national team in the world. They were ranked as the worst because almost all of their games, at least prior to the 2020s, came against European competition, the confederation with the most depth and talent out of any in world football. San Marino may have constantly been losing games. They were, there is no may about it, but they were losing games against formidable opponents. The likes of Anguilla, the US Virgin Islands, and the British Virgin Islands, the three teams directly above San Marino in the FIFA World Rankings, also routinely lose games, except they lose them against the likes of Barbados, Aruba, and the Cayman Islands. Anguilla, who are one place above San Marino in the FIFA World Rankings, lost 8-0 against Puerto Rico earlier this year in a 2026 World Cup qualifier. Respectfully, and unlike the speakers at Donald Trump rallies, I do actually respect the people of Puerto Rico. There is not a chance in hell that San Marino are a worse team than Anguilla, or that they would be on the end of such a heavy defeat against Puerto Rico. That is little consolation, I feel, though, when you're on the end of another 6-0 defeat against Belgium for the 8th time in a row. In some ways, the identity of being the supposed worst team in the world, however inaccurate, came to benefit San Marino, in that it brought them a strange fascination from football fans with no other ties to the microstate. At San Marino_FA, a fan account which provides live updates on all of San Marino's games and emotive reactions to everything that happens before, during, and after them, has almost 200,000 followers on Twitter. 183,500 at the time of recording to be exact. That is over 5 times the population of San Marino, following an unofficial fan account which provides coverage of and updates during their games. It is reflective of the unlikely outside interest in one of international football's ultimate minnows, as is the fact that the fan who runs the account, Martino Bastianelli, is neither San Marinese nor is he even Italian. Bastianelli is from Breda, in the Netherlands, but has practically severed all ties with the 3-time World Cup finalists, owing to his love affair with the national team that he has no connection to and that will never qualify for either the World Cup or the Euros. Actually, I shouldn't say that, should I? At the current rate, the World Cup will be expanded to about 200 teams before long, and San Marino will have a great shot at qualifying. The heightened interest in San Marino, at home and abroad, has helped to transform the San Marino Stadium, formerly the Stadio Olimpico de Serravalle. Whereas St. Marinus was a Christian missionary who flocked to Monte Titano to take refuge from a woman claiming to be his wife, many football missionaries from around the world have made the voyage to the San Marino Stadium, typically, to witness a routine San Marino defeat. A San Marino fan group, who call themselves Brigata Mai Una Gioia, the Never One Joy Brigade in English, was founded in 2012. A 6,664 capacity stadium, which is 20% of San Marino's population, can be hard to fill. It would be the equivalent of Wembley Stadium, holding 11.4 million people, or the Maracanã in Brazil over 40 million. For most of the first 2 decades of the San Marino national team's existence, the San Marino Stadium felt like a quiet, empty, and relatively emotionless place. A few hundred San Marinese football fans sat in silence with a solemn sense of resignation. The players knew San Marino were going to lose, the opposition knew San Marino were going to lose, and most importantly, the small number of fans inside of the stadium knew that San Marino were going to lose. Now, aided by fan groups, foreigners, and a resurgence of interest among locals, the San Marino Stadium is still rarely more than half full, with away fans often outnumbering and outsinging the home fans, but the atmosphere is radically different, far more engaged, and, even if somewhat ironically, at least until recently, much more positive. As far as most casual observers were concerned, there was no difference between San Marino in 2010, 2015, or 2020. After all, it can be difficult to notice a notable uptick in form or performance levels when you haven't won a game in 20 years. In reality, however, signs of progress and improvement have been obvious to those paying closer attention. Pierangelo Manzaroli, the man who compared San Marino's 0-0 draw with Estonia to the birth of his child, brought a seriousness and a discipline to the national team in 2014. Part of San Marinese football throughout his entire adult life, Manzaroli won 38 caps for the national team between 1991 and 2001, and he spent 7 years coaching San Marino's B team, under 15s, and under 21s, before being promoted to the senior team. It would have been easy then for Manzaroli, having been institutionalised if you like, to be wearied by constant failure and resign to defeat, but instead, he focused all of his effort on giving San Marino the best possible shot at however unlikely success. He introduced modern GPS vests and data analysis to the national team setup, which went hand in hand with a new emphasis on fitness and discipline. Strict disciplinarian Felix Magath is often quoted as having told his players in Germany that he couldn't make them the best team in the league, but he could make them the fittest. And Manzaroli followed a similar mantra. Of course, that was slightly easier for Magath to implement, working full-time with professional footballers on the training ground 6 or 7 days a week, compared with Manzaroli working predominantly with amateurs and semi-professionals, attempting to balance their day jobs with their training up against some of the best players and teams in Europe. Nonetheless, it was a defining moment for football development in San Marino. It was during this time that San Marino became especially renowned for parking the bus, with Manzaroli trying to bring about some more respectable scorelines. There were still some heavy defeats, don't get me wrong, most notably a 10-0 loss against Croatia in a friendly, and another 8-0 drubbing against Germany, but there were also causes for optimism. San Marino were unfortunate to lose 1-0 against Liechtenstein in 2015, they only lost 2-1 against Lithuania, and 2-0 against Slovenia at home in Euro 2016 qualifying, and of course, who could forget, they earned that famous draw against Estonia. It might not sound like much, but San Marino went from conceding 57 and 53 goals in Euro 2008 and Euro 2012 qualifying to conceding just 36 goals in Euro 2016 qualifying under Manzaroli, as well as scoring their first goal in Euros qualifying since 2007 and earning their first ever draw in a Euros qualifier. Against Estonia. Don't know if I mentioned it. Rome wasn't built in a day, alright? And nor was St. Marinus' microstate or his football team. Manzaroli departed in 2017, having laid the groundwork for his successor, Franco Varela, who would go on to draw 2 of his 34 games in charge. In the same year, Marco Torra became president of the San Marino Football Federation, outlining a strategic plan for the nation's football to run from 2021 to 2024. Torra's plan identified 5 key areas for development, namely, improving San Marino's FIFA ranking, raising participation levels, especially among women referees and coaches, aiding the development of local clubs, developing women's football, and improving San Marino's football infrastructure. In November 2021, at the beginning of that cycle, Fabrizio Costantini took the reins as the national team's new head coach. Having only had one manager for over 15 years, San Marino had just appointed their third in the space of 7 years, but all brought something valuable and different to San Marino's development. In Costantini's case, that was a sense of belief and what seemed at times like almost delusional positivity. Costantini would talk about going into every game believing that San Marino could win it, football only being 11 versus 11, regardless of the opposition, and how anything could happen out on the pitch. It was mostly nonsense, of course. San Marino were bound to lose almost all of those games, but it was nonsense that instilled a newfound confidence and sense of belief in San Marino's players, and that was reflected on the pitch. Since losing 10-0 against England in November 2021, which was itself San Marino's heaviest defeat in over 5 years, San Marino have played 30 games, and they have only lost 1 of them by 5 goals or more. That would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Euro 2024 qualifying was the surest sign yet of San Marino's remarkable progression. It seems odd saying that when they lost all 10 of their games, finishing bottom of their group with 0 points, but San Marino put up multiple valiant performances without any real precedent in their history. They went to Slovenia, who would go on to reach the knockout stage of Euro 2024, where they drew 0-0 but lost on penalties against Portugal, and San Marino only lost 2-0 against them. They held Northern Ireland to the same scoreline, and, most impressively of all, they held both Denmark and Finland to just 2-1 defeats at home, in games where they very nearly earned themselves another famous draw. Denmark are Euros winners who reached the semi-finals in 2021 and went on to reach the knockout stage in 2024. If San Marino could hold them to a 2-1 defeat, what could they do against fellow minnows? What's more, In October and November 2023 alone, San Marino scored more goals in competitive games than they had done in the last 6 years combined. Something special was building. 2 friendlies in 4 days against St. Kitts and Nevis, a dual-island Caribbean nation of just 50,000 people, ranked 143rd in the world, a full 67 places above San Marino, was earmarked by some people as the moment that elusive win might arrive. San Marino lost the first encounter 3-1 and drew the second one 0-0. The Sammarinese champagne would have to remain on ice, for now at least, but it was getting closer. And so, that brings us to the UEFA Nations League, a blatant cash grab created to maximise revenue, which has inadvertently transformed the fortunes of some teams and has had a massive positive impact, not unlike the UEFA Conference League in club football. For the top teams, the Nations League hasn't yet been elevated beyond the status of glorified friendlies and warm-up games, but for the minnows of the international game, it has rocked their world. All of a sudden, instead of repeatedly getting hammered by comparative powerhouses in qualifiers, or attempting to schedule friendlies against distant island nations, now the likes of San Marino are playing competitive fixtures, which they have a legitimate chance of winning. It is transformative, not only in the simple fact that it has given countries like San Marino winnable and indeed drawable games, but also psychologically, they have an attainable target, a realistic goal to try and build towards, and instead of having to park the bus against vastly superior opposition, hopelessly so, they can actually think about their tactics and strategy in the same way that ordinary teams can, building something more sustainable and long-term than constant firefighting and attempts to repel wave after wave of attacks. San Marino were also given the easiest possible UEFA Nations League draw up against Liechtenstein, the only team they've ever beaten 20 years ago, and Gibraltar, the next smallest territory with a FIFA-affiliated national team, who are the 2 lowest-ranked UEFA national teams, alongside San Marino. Nonetheless, even with all of that having been said, and the likelihood that San Marino would take something from at least one of those games, winning 2, drawing 1, and only losing 1 of them, given San Marino's history up to this point, is absolutely remarkable. The scorer of San Marino's only goal against Liechtenstein in that initial 1-0 win, 19-year-old Nico Sensoli, wasn't even born the last time that San Marino had won a game, also, incidentally, against Liechtenstein. And yet, he would only have to wait 2 months for San Marino to win again, also against Liechtenstein. This would be the first time that San Marino had come from behind to win a game, the first time that they had won a game away from home, and the first time that they had scored 3 goals in a game. 2 of San Marino's 3 goal scorers, namely Lorenzo Lazzari and Nicola Nani, were just 1 and 4 years old when San Marino won their only other game back in 2004. With San Marino's all-time record now standing at 3 wins from 211 games, all 3 of them coming against Liechtenstein, it would be a really big missed opportunity if the away fans at the Rheinparkstadion in Vaduz weren't chanting, "Can we play you every week?" In reality, there has been little to split San Marino and Liechtenstein for a long time, and only the finest of margins has handed San Marino the worst team in the world tag, while Liechtenstein have been considered nondescript minnows, receiving just a fraction of the attention. The irony of the situation, I suppose, is that San Marino's reputation as the world's worst team, or at least Europe's, is what made them a source of fascination. Now that is no longer the case, they are nowhere near the worst team in the world, and can stake a strong claim to have surpassed at least Liechtenstein in Europe, following successive victories against them. Can that level of interest be maintained? What made San Marino interesting was how bad they were, and that they lost all of the time. If they're actually alright and draw and win the odd game, where's the fun in that? Should we all start supporting Liechtenstein now? I jest, of course, but it is an unusual catch-22 situation. The reality is that San Marino will almost certainly be relegated from the UEFA Nations League scene next season, which will be in the 2026-27 season, given the significant step up in class, but it will be a fantastic learning curve for them, and by virtue of the gradual progression within the Nations League, unlike the shock and awe of a qualifying campaign and trips to the Stade de France, for example, they should improve all the time. Talk of World Cup qualification, meanwhile, like this article in the Associated Press, may be a little premature. Although San Marino may technically be 2 games away from reaching the World Cup in Canada, Mexico, and the United States, the likelihood of them winning either of those games, guaranteed to be against vastly superior opposition, is, put kindly, extremely slim, despite the fantastic progress that they have made. I would go as far as to suggest that if San Marino did qualify for the 2026 World Cup, it would be the single greatest achievement in the history of football, given that the country's entire population wouldn't be able to fill out a single stadium at the tournament, and wouldn't even fill half of most of them. Despite the development of women's football being one of the pillars of San Marino Football Federation's 2021 to 2024 strategic plan, San Marino doesn't yet have a women's national team. The San Marino Academy, otherwise just known as San Marino, who only have 5 San Marinese players, the rest are all Italian, were founded in 2004 to build towards that prospect. Competing within the Italian league system, like Victor San Marino in the men's game, San Marino Academy reached the Serie A Femminile for the first time in the 2020-21 season, although they are back in Serie B now. Given that Liechtenstein and Gibraltar both have women's teams now, who played their first official matches in 2021, that has to be the next step in the progression of San Marinese football, and the national team's recent unprecedented success ought to provide a platform for those kinds of ambitions to finally be realised. Strange as it may seem, in relative terms, this is San Marino's golden generation, and unlike England or Belgium's so-called golden generations, this one has already achieved immortality and exceeded any and all expectations. Before Roberto Civoli was appointed, less than a year ago, San Marino's all-time record read, played 201, lost 192, drawn 8, and won 1. Under Civoli, San Marino's record reads, played 10, lost 6, drawn 2, won 2. He has a 20% win percentage. The next best win percentage among San Marino managers was Gianpaolo Mazza at 1.17%. Every other San Marino manager won 0% of their games in charge. May you live in interesting times is an Old English saying, often wrongly cited as being a translation of an ancient Chinese curse. It's a saying that I sometimes find myself thinking about. My grandfather was born in 1924, which meant that he was raised in the aftermath of World War I. He was 5 at the time of the Wall Street crash, still only 15 when World War II broke out, and he lived to see 93 years of technological advancements, from the jet age to the advent of the internet, which would have seemed unthinkable when he was a child. My mum, meanwhile, was born in 1961. The Cuban Missile Crisis happened before she turned 1, the moon landing happened when she was just 7, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union when she was 30. She has lived to see the birth of DNA fingerprinting, the Hubble Space Telescope, and smartphones that she still doesn't know how to use. That is all well and good, but my generation, and most of yours, have lived to see something arguably even more special. San Marino's golden era. The months in which San Marinese football threw off its shackles, stared their 200th defeat in less than 210 games in the eye, and said, "Not today, Satan." To become canonised as a saint, any prospective saint must first perform 2 acts that the Vatican declares to be miracles in which God has interceded. St. Marinus' miracles came through the power of healing. It is said that Marinus healed the 6th son of a woman from Rimini called Felicissima, who owned Monte Titano through prayer, and that is why she gifted him the mountain. That is impressive, of course. I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? But arguably not as impressive as going 20 years without winning a single game of football, and then winning 2 of them in as many months, and with it, promotion to the UEFA Nations League Group C. I mean, by comparison, healing a sick kid seems positively mundane, and if Marinus deserved to be canonised for performing 2 miracles, at this stage, surely Roberto Civoli deserves the same. That is it for today's video, but thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. I obviously hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and of course, goes without saying, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also my second channel, Alfie Potts Armor, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that YouTube thinks you might enjoy watching after this one. You can also find me on Twitter, for now, Instagram, Threads, and recently created a Blue Sky, if that's what it's called. You can find me on all of those. The username is at HITC Sevens on the first three, and then on Blue Sky, I don't know, just search my name, I will come up. You can find all of those links, plus a whole lot more, down in the video description below. Cheers, and Forza Titani.